All right, welcome to Politics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. And Arlen, we're a little bit optimistic there before we go live, saying, hey, this could be the first program we do where there are no technical glitches. I assured you there would be some. And we actually just had a tiny little one. The counter ran down before I faded into us.
Nobody would know, Hal, if you didn't mention it.
It's true. It's true. So we have a question, Arlen, and I sometimes give you some historical references and questions. I know you were the quotation quotient guru. You had that column where you would ask people who said something, and you'd come up with a relatively famous quote or something that should have been quote famous if it wasn't, and then ask who said it. I always really enjoyed those.
Thank you. I enjoyed it too.
You did, and you had a long run with the Herald. I remember they were going through a long period of layoffs, and you survived a number of them. In the end, though, I guess consolidation and media lost profitability got you too.
9 years, Hal. I was on 9 years, either in print or online.
It was a great run. I think I was even one of the answers, the wrong answer to one of your quotes.
I tried to get my friends in there, sure.
So I have a historical reference actually in the thumbnail for today's program, which is Trump first and 3 question marks. And you have a big picture of Trump with, like, I have the little block or the no Trump, like it's a circle with a red line through it. And I make the lines relatively thin so you can see what I'm drawing through. But then we have in the background Jeffrey Schumer. So that's a reference to the Germany First strategy during World War II. I asked him, but he didn't really answer. You wouldn't remember that, Arlen. That was a little before your time.
World War II. Before time. And by the way, you keep saying Jeffrey Schumer. It's Chuck Schumer.
Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries.
Right.
So I was probably just speaking too quickly, but there you go. See, in the Jeffries and Schumer, not Jeffrey Schumer, but Jeffries, Schumer, the 2 Dem leaders. And by the way, I do put the attribution there. That's from Politico, that image. I like that picture there. The Trump picture, that's just his public domain shot, the White House picture. It's kind of a weird picture. His eyes he has a squinty eye there. It's not a great shot. I don't know why he chose it.
Yeah, he does things like that all the time. You never know.
Is that his incipient dementia, Arlen, which you suspect?
Yeah, maybe. And I think that was from maybe one of his, when he got arrested for something. And that's when they took that shot and he liked it. Maybe it's a mugshot or something. I don't know. But Trump is a little bit of
street cred there, right? He's kind of showing his chops to the hood. All right, we've got Arlen, thebigpicturereport.com is where he blogs. We got a couple of stories, at least one we're going to feature that he is featuring from, I guess, your favorite, I hate to say your favorite podcaster, Thom Hartmann, maybe your second favorite. But before we get there, Arlen, I always feature, I always really do center the terrible circumstances in the Middle East and specifically Gaza, and they continue. Now, apparently Trump is, several news reports are saying he's fed up with Netanyahu, Arlen. He's pushing him. He's got his boy Witkoff out there. That is true. Witkoff is out there really pushing for a ceasefire. But as I said about Harris Biden, unless you're prepared to withhold arms from Israel, I don't think you're going to get very far with Netanyahu.
And the Democrats can't do that. They can't stop what's going on. It's going to have to be Trump and the Republican Party. And, they're not prepared
to do it either. I mean, they're fighting back against any resolutions to withhold supplies to Israel. And that means it will continue, as far as I can tell, unless there's some other threat that Trump can hold over Netanyahu. And he may be, I do believe, I really think he does want this stuff to end. But again, like Biden, if you can't say no to Israel, they will do what they want.
Yeah. I think the Trump just feels that, he could do whatever he wants to do, but then he finds out that somebody like Putin is not going along with what he wants. He's kind of surprised to see Putin increasing his offensive against Kiev, against Ukraine. And he seems surprised by it, although everybody else knows that that's just who Putin is and how he's always been. So
I'll be honest, I'm a little surprised. I had hoped and I had suspected because with Biden in the White House and Blinken as the Secretary of State, there was a lot of provocation directed at Putin and a lot of rhetoric. I really did hope, I believed some degree of reason, that a change in the White House might lead to a change in Putin, but sadly that has not happened. But to be fair, though, Trump has a lot more leverage over Netanyahu. He can just simply stop arming Netanyahu. We're not arming Putin. We're arming Ukraine. And despite all the supplies, the billions and billions and billions of dollars of weapons that we provided Zelensky over the years, that hasn't stopped Putin, and neither has a more conciliatory approach towards him.
I think, those in both cases, I think Trump has very little power. He'd like to do certain things, but ultimately Putin's going to do whatever Putin wants to do regarding the Ukraine war, and Netanyahu's going to do whatever Netanyahu wants to do, even though it certainly doesn't look good, all the things that he is doing, of the people that are dying. I mean, there's lots of war crimes that Israel is perpetrating, and it's very sad and very unfortunate, and too many people are dying and hurting and starving to death. It's just terrible.
Yeah, it seems pretty clear cut that what the Israeli military and Netanyahu are doing has crossed numerous lines. One thing that really bothers me, Arlen, there you see 79 dead in the past 24 hours. I'll give you the count, but I wanted your take on this, I want to ask you, maybe you have friends, maybe you talk to people who have a different viewpoint than I do, or even than you do. I know you're slightly less condemnatory towards Israel, at least you have in the past, but you're very critical of them. I'm not trying to say you're excusing or making arguments for Israel, but yeah. I think you were a little more shocked and dismayed by the Hamas attack, and were more prepared to cut Israel a little tiny bit of slack when it retaliated than I have been. Why do you think, though, putting that slight difference, a nuanced difference between us, why do you think there are many who are so adamant that Israel is acting appropriately and defending what Israel is doing? Because I see that in social media all the time. I don't really know people who I actually know one person. I'm wondering if you have any insight or any thoughts on why there are people who just simply will not criticize Israel.
Well, I think the main reasons would be that, there's a lot of Jewish people in power and have a lot of money. That's part of it. And, there's also, and then Israel, it's hard to say exactly, why, but it's also, I think, the history too. I think our history is such that we're always said that we support Israel and we're going to make sure that they exist and all of that. So I think people are it's a habit.
It's kind of like muscle memory, right? You just sort of reflexively support Israel. And I hear that. I actually talked a little bit about that. It's weird for me. That's something that's hard for me to empathize with, because I don't feel like I have that particular gene, but I think you're absolutely right. I think it's real.
Yeah, there's just no benefit to anybody to really support Hamas and the Gaza people, but just looking at the the war crimes going on there, that it's impossible to ignore, but people will try.
I think what is really painful for a lot of people, and I think may move the dial a little bit against Israel, is when you talk about the children. It does seem very, one of the reasons that the New York Times and other Israel defenders were always talking about alleged rapes, sex crimes committed by Hamas, it was because the killing of over 1,100 people wasn't enough. People were like, well, Israel's killing a lot of people too. Israel takes hostages too. But if you talk about raping children and cutting fetuses out of women's stomachs, that's really going to turn people off. And that was somewhat effective. It's true, although it was also a lot of bogus stories in there, or certainly, if not bogus, poorly, if completely undocumented.
Well,
This
Hal,
isn't the case with the children. The children we know are being shot and killed, and it still doesn't seem to move as many people as I would wish it could.
I think one of the most horrific stories I've seen, and you probably saw it too, was yesterday. There was a doctor who has 10 children, and 9 of them were killed at the same day because of Israeli bombing. I mean, 9 out of 10 of this doctor's children. It's, what can you say except this war has to stop?
Yeah, and one other point, I'm not trying to sit here and defend, and it is so horrible what you just described, and apparently there was a shooting on the West Bank, or a soldier did some really, really atrocious thing, and they weren't prosecuted, and that caused an outcry as well. Not to defend Hamas, I want to get into that discussion, but the fact is Hamas isn't in Israel now. It's not committing terror now. It's not killing people now. Yeah. It's Israel that's doing the killing day after day. So I think it's a little disingenuous to point back to what happened well over, more than 18 months ago and say, well, that justifies what Israel's doing today.
Yeah, and there's a matter of numbers. I mean, Israel lost 1,100 or so people, but they're killing, over 50,000 civilians. So, it's not commensurate with what happened with history. So, yeah, there's nothing good about this war, and the fact that Netanyahu is still in power because he's got a lot of political power, and even though there's a lot of people in Israel that are upset with what he's doing, he can't be. It's like Trump; he just can't be stopped based on the government that they have now.
I always enjoy talking pretty much about anything with you, but I know you like our pundits, like our Robert Reich and our Nick Kristof, or I should say because you're a big fan of those two, as well as Thom Hartmann. They like to, it seems like they sure like to talk a lot about our current president, Donald Trump. And the talk is invariably extremely negative, extremely critical. I'm wondering if they're pursuing what I call a Trump first strategy. We'll get to that. But I wanted to share with you this. Have you seen this? This is making the social media rounds, but I made sure this is a legit 1992 Mad magazine image that both Snopes and AP have verified. So I'm not spreading misinformation or fake AI or fake bots or anything. So you read it. When should we? It's 1992, or this is 33 years ago. Pretty prescient, would you not say?
Yeah, but I don't think anybody's going to say you're copying anything, because actually it's not a photograph there. That is a cartoon. I'm pretty sure of that. So,
it is a cartoon from Mad Magazine, but it's described by Alison F., who I think she may be a bot. I don't know whether she's a real person. Her avatar is Veronica, I believe, from Archie Comics. When should we believe Donald Trump? When he writes a book telling us what a financial genius he is, or when he has to beg his bankers to restructure his debt? Well, both are true, right? He does both. I mean, those are both accurate descriptions of behaviors Trump engages in. So it's legit.
It's not so bad that Trump lies every single chance he gets. I don't think he's ever told the truth. I challenge people sometimes. When has he ever told the truth? And you'd be hard pressed to find a time when he has.
Well, come on. I mean, I can't really. But I do want to so I don't know if that's Veronica or not. I'm going to just quickly, because I'm always taken by the Archie comics. I was a big fan when I was in summer camp. My son found this in a Mad magazine. See, Alison F., I think that's Veronica from Betty and Veronica.
Yeah.
Archie's 2 girlfriends, and all of us sort of like Ginger and Marianne. Why was he so besotted by Veronica when Betty was so much nicer? And they were the exact same face, except one had blonde hair and one had dark hair, but they were, it was a cartoon, so they didn't make a lot of distinctions between them. So do you like seeing that stuff? Like, I think we all like looking back nostalgically and seeing how something was first seen many, many years ago.
Yeah, and I always loved cartoons and funny stuff, humor. I mean, it's the only way I could get through what we're going through right now. I mean, it's horrible, the world we live in now, and our president is just horrible. But I get a lot of laughs because people come up with very clever things, anti-Trump things, and like that, and it makes things go down a little easier.
Yeah, it's very, very down times we live in, and it's hard for me to take a lot of joy as well. I did enjoy a baseball game on Sunday with friends and my son. We had a good time, but it's, everything is kind of colored through the terrible world situation we live in. And you mentioned Trump, and yeah, Trump is really bad. For me, though, this malaise has predated Trump, predated his second presidency. I mean, as you know, I've been seeing us on a very bad downslope for a long time, and this is part of it, as far as I can tell, or I think as we can all agree.
There's no question about it. Hal, you're right, and Trump just makes it worse. So, the future does not look bright at this moment.
Thom Hartmann, longtime broadcaster, and now I guess he still does radio too, right? Although I guess we never watch radio anymore.
Yeah, I think he probably is on television too. I mean, he's everywhere. Thom Hartmann has just tried to spread himself all over the media in every possible way, and he's got a lot of followers, but.
Well, you were always one of them, but I guess you've even said you don't really tune into his podcasts, but you follow him through his posts. Is that more social media writings, I guess?
Well, there's a lot of good people like Hartmann. I don't just stick to one or two people. There's a lot of people I think, are really on top of all this stuff. And I think Thom Hartmann is the best historically. He seems to have a pretty good handle on the way things have been and how things have changed. I mean, he seems to know everything, and he knows all the details and has written book after book. But people like Robert Reich, I like to follow, and there's others. Ezra Klein, Nicholas Kristof, Maureen Dowd. There's lots of them.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Ezra Klein. I'm actually going to be talking about Ezra Klein's book Abundance with friend of the show, Kirsten Stade. Kirsten joined me some months ago, and she's written a review of Abundance. That's Ezra Klein's book with co-author Thompson. I forget his first name, but I have a lot of issues with that. I think you probably would too. I don't know if you've read it, Arlen, or read about it, but it's pretty neoliberal, and I know you have issues with the neolibs, so I think you may have some with that particular aspect. By the way, do subscribe if you get a chance. We'd love to have you do that. And don't forget. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But there's another book that came out recently that's getting a lot of controversy, both positive and negative, and that's Jake Tapper's book about what was going on in the last years of Biden's administration. And I've been hearing lately that there's a lot of inaccuracies and problems with it. So,
I think it's true, the underlying theme of the book, which is that the Democratic Party covered up, and you and I have discussed this, covered up Biden's illness. But I think what's irritating a lot of people is that Jake Tapper was a big part of that, right? I mean, Jake Tapper was harshly cross-examining people who questioned Biden's competence. He went after Dean Phillips when Dean Phillips, a relatively obscure Congress member, was challenging Biden for the Democratic nomination. He made fun of Phillips or he attacked Phillips, I should say, for doing that. He went after Laura Trump very aggressively when Laura Trump said that Biden was demented. And the thing is, we all could see the cognitive decline, and yet Tapper, now writing this book, trying to profit from a recitation of the Democratic Party's failings, himself was a major part, a significant part of that cover-up to begin with.
Let me say something about the media. I think, we could certainly criticize Fox News and all their copycats. They just lie all the time. But the major media, the established media, is not doing a great job either. I mean, they're reporting a lot of things about what Trump is doing, but I don't think they're really, giving the full story or how bad it really is and how bad Trump, really is. That they really have not helped the situation, and people aren't getting much from the mainstream media as much as they should.
Yeah, I would agree with your critique of the mainstream media generally, but I would argue that their failings are at least as great when it comes to not reporting on the terrible things that were done under Biden, under Obama, and frankly, under George W. Bush. When George W. Bush was president, the Washington Post and the New York Times did an awful lot to try to cover up some of the worst things that the Bush administration was doing. I think that's the same for Obama and for Biden as well. I think they've been harder on Trump than they have on any other recent president in my mind.
There's another issue too that we hardly ever talk about, and that's the fact that Trump has a lot of power over these networks, over these major stations. I mean, he's been suing them for billions of dollars. He's been, and they really are stuck because, they can't compete against the power that Trump has. They could lose their license. They could, he could cause problems for them. And that's a major part of it.
Yeah, I don't have any sympathy for them. They made their own bed. Yeah. They did everything they could to undermine Bernie Sanders, for example. Not that he's even so great, but better by far than the other options. I'm not. They did everything they could to kind of play both sides against each other, rather than report accurately and honestly about what's happening in Israel. So I just can't feel sympathy for them. If you want the truth, go to YouTube, go to podcasts, go to maybe Medium, depending on who you follow. Go to, obviously, Politics is where you go.
Yeah, you have to go a lot of different places, and it's hard to know who's really telling the truth or who has the best information. But you also have to consider that these networks, this major media, they're all owned by big corporations. So they're going to have their point of view that's not going to be very radical,
Of course not. Of course, they're never going to champion real wealth and income redistribution. I think that's the biggest problem of all. Let's get into this article. This screenshot here is from thebigpicturereport.com, Arlen's blog, posted this a couple days ago. From Hartmann, the biggest political con of the last century unmasked, and I would even say the last millennium, since we had a new millennium as of the year 2000, 2001. Why the destruction of public institutions, the middle class, and government itself may not be a mistake, but the mission. So what is that con, Arlen, that Hartmann is so upset about?
Well, I think it's probably that all the money these days is going to the top. It's going to the billionaires, that the middle class and working class people are not getting benefits from government, and they're getting, and the difference between the rich and the poor is getting larger and larger. So, but people don't talk about it as much as I think they should.
I'm glad you struggled a little bit with that question also. What's the biggest con? Because I don't think Hartmann was real clear, but as I understood it, I think it's more, tax cuts for the rich are the biggest driver of the national debt right now, and the biggest reason we're living in kind of an austerity type economy.
Yeah. Well, the average voter, the ones who voted for Trump, especially the MAGA voters, they don't fully understand these things because the major media doesn't spend much time on these kind of issues of wealth inequality. So, that's important, I think.
I'll be honest with you, Arlen, I'm going to push back on that one. I think poor, struggling, working people, blue-collar people, they recognize all too well how raw a deal they're getting in today's economy. I think they know that the rich and powerful have virtually everything, and they are left with a few crumbs.
You're right, Hal. But, the difference is that they think Trump might have the answer. Clearly, he's the wrong person.
Do you think this is where I think you and I really I don't think a lot of Trump voters really believe Trump has the answer. I think a lot of Trump voters looked at the Democrats and said, you lied to me. You said you'd do this. You said you'd do that. You said you'd pass a $15 minimum wage. You didn't. You said that free trade deals would bring more jobs back to America. They didn't. And, they looked at both parties and they say they're both bad. They both hurt me. But Trump is at least talking about some of my concerns, so I'll vote for him. I'm not saying that every voter. I mean, look, people have a million different reasons. Every voter has a different reason for voting for whom they do. But I just think to say that, look, Trump may well have won the Black Latino vote. I think he may well have won the Latino male vote. And I think the Latinos said, hey, Democrat parties aren't good for me. I'm working class. I'm blue collar. I'm middle class, barely. And I don't have enough. So maybe Trump will help me where the Democrats didn't.
Well, I think you're right, Hal. I won't argue with you. I think the voters probably realize there really is no place to go that's really going to be in their favor, that's going to help them. If they're smart, they should look for somebody like Jill Stein, a third party.
There you go. Wow. I can't believe I'm hearing you say that, Arlen. That doesn't sound like the Arlen I know. I sort of get a little nervous if I win arguments. I start to wonder what's going on here.
Well, of course, I'm teasing you.
I beat you down. You just don't want to fight. You'd rather switch than fight. I hear you.
Yeah, but there really isn't any place to go. I mean,
look, Trump is awful. I'm not going to defend Trump. I didn't vote for Trump. I would never vote for Trump. I just think we need to coalesce behind a true pro-working class candidate.
Well, what we really need to do, as I've said many, many times, is we've got to get money out of politics. That's what's driving everything. Right now, the rich have unlimited power to donate as much money as they want. Often they don't even have to disclose that they're doing it. What chance does the working class have in a situation like that? None. I mean, it's those who are on the top, who want the tax cuts and help from Trump and all that. They're the ones that have the power. They're the ones that have the money. And I don't see anything changing.
Let's talk just briefly about this segment I put on screen. This is about COVID. Trump and men saying you can't get COVID unless you're over 65 or sick, which obviously we know isn't true. We are at greater risk without, I guess. I mean, it seems to me like the COVID epidemic has somewhat run its course. It's less, when you do get COVID, if you do, it's less serious. It's more like a flu. So I don't want progressives to overstate COVID as a risk factor going forward. I don't want to understate either. But clearly, cutbacks to NIH, NOAA, these are very, very serious. FAA, they're wrong. They're misguided. The theory is government, as Reagan said, the biggest lie is I'm from the government, I'm here to help. In fact, government is there so often to help. But lately, it hasn't done enough, I think, for people. And that's why they're embracing somebody who, I agree with you in many ways, is even worse.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much cutting of important things that help our country, that make people, healthier and deal with the climate and so many other things, and the environment. And, Trump doesn't care about those things. And the people his people he surrounds himself with, they don't care about things like that. And if they're more concerned about getting tax cuts for the rich, and the rest of these things to them are not as important.
Oh, no question. I wish, like you, it's depressing. I feel depressed about all this. I don't really have any answers. Do you think, and this is a little bit off where we had planned, but it's irrelevant to our discussion. I heard a Benjamin Studebaker, who's a pretty well-known political scientist. He does a lot of podcasts on Brianna Joy Gray's show. I don't have a clip or anything, but he argued that the reason Bernie did not win is because there's a real split among Democratic primary voters between the blue-collar voters, the working-class voters, and college-educated and above voters. And the second group, college-educated and above, they may not necessarily be wealthy. They may not be affluent, but they tend to be consumers of traditional media, whatever, CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times. and they tend to be a little bit more conservative on economic issues, and a lot further to, if for want of a better description, to the left on cultural issues, social justice issues. So to the extent that Bernie wanted to appeal to those voters, the college-educated people, maybe more like us in some ways, although I'm not, my views don't jibe with this, but Bernie had to move towards a more identity politics, more focused on a defund the police message, on a pro-reparations message, although he never embraced that, and soft sell the Medicare for all, the tariffs message, the economic redistribution message. And by doing that, he lost working class voters. What do you say to that argument?
I don't think it's so much the voters that didn't want Bernie. And I hate to beat a dead horse, but it really comes down to the people with money are controlling the parties. You know, the Democratic Party is mostly run by people who have who are powerful, who have money behind them, and Bernie makes them uncomfortable, understandably. So I think that's the main reason. It's the powerful people who run these parties that give us the candidates that we get. And I mean, what kind of choice did we have? I mean, we have almost
well, Studebaker made this point, though. Let me just jump on top of what you're saying. Studebaker made this point that to the extent that Bernie did embrace more identity type politics, like again, a defund the police, Black Lives Matter message, that more he did that, the more traditional media like the New York Times or CNN would broadcast that message, and others who were reaching out to working class voters to tell them, hey, Bernie's not on your side. He's on the side of voters of color. He's on the side of identity politics, thereby alienating working class voters from Bernie. On the flip side, when Bernie would embrace, as he certainly did in 2016, that very strong Medicare for all, pro-tariffs message, then they broadcast the Hillary Clinton. Well, we can take over the banks and have a national banking system and sue them, but it's still not going to end racism. So the media itself is using whichever position Bernie takes against him with the group, the voting cohort that won't agree with him on it.
Well, you have to go back to what you just said before about the media. The media are controlled by corporations, by people.
Well, you said money. Actually, you said it, Arlen, but either way,
I think you agreed with it.
I'll take the credit, but you actually brought that up. No, but that also jives with your message that it's when you go up against the billionaire class, you better make sure you got every gun in your arsenal fully loaded and prepared to respond to, and you still may lose.
And that's why Jill Stein is not doing as well as she should, because nobody, the major media are not going to be talking about her, are not going to be giving people information that there are other parties with different views out there. It's unfortunate, but we did, we had that one third party candidate, Ross Perot, that had some traction, but after him, there's been nobody else that's really come forward that could be considered a third party or independent candidate from the major parties.
Well, Perot is also a billionaire, I believe. Yeah. Very, very rich. Not a billionaire.
Yeah, but his
rich
ideas weren't always, the fact that because he was rich or that benefited him directly. I mean, he talked about, our going overseas to, free trade and all that. And he said, we're going to pay a price for it. And he was right.
He was right. And he did get a lot of popular support for that. All right. This is more from Hartmann. 2/3 of us Americans can't afford the basic necessities of life. And this is a point that I've been making, is that this economy just isn't working for people. I think people are desperate. They grab at whatever lifeline they think. Trump sort of threw a lifeline at them. I agree with you. He's not going to pull people in, right? I mean, he just throws the rope out there, including the both ends of it. So he's not throwing a lifeline. But unless Democrats, and I think this is Nick Kristof's message, unless Democrats show they can make life better for working people, they're going to remain lost, as you call them.
Yeah, unless we change the system that we unfortunately go through to elect a president and other people, things are not really going to change. And how do you get that started? How do you get people to get working in that direction, changing the way we do our politics, the way we do our voting? And unless that changes, we're going to keep having the same problems over and over and over again.
Trump, I'm very critical of Trump. I'm not defending Trump. If we had a ceasefire in Gaza, if we were moving towards peace in Gaza, I would be far less, as bad as Trump is on so many things, and he is, even putting aside all the corruption, and it's terrible. He's you know what? The argument you always hear from the media now is Trump has taken corruption to another level. And I agree with that. We've had really bad corruption. There's been a lot of corruption, but he's even worse. It's hardly a great, embrace of Democrats to say he's the worst, but he is the worst. But even with all that, if we had a ceasefire, I would be like, okay, well, I'll take anything just to have this killing end. But it's not. It's continuing. So you and I both see Trump as terrible. I'm not defending Trump. What do you think are the arguments that Kristof puts out there that would be most likely to resonate with American voters and Trump is immensely vulnerable piece?
Well, I think the bottom line is just that it's the middle class and working class who are not getting the benefits of government. It's the rich that are, and the gap keeps widening. And you just mentioned something about so many Americans, the majority of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Any bad financial disaster, medical, or their car breaks down or something like that, they can't pay for it. So, these are this is supposed to be the richest country in the history of the world, but it sure doesn't seem like it. If you look over the people that live in this country, you just don't see it.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
It's
I'm 100% on that, and it's so here's what and so you're saying that this accurate, right? What we see with Trump, he's basically leveraging his office. I didn't put the piece that I think it was from Maureen Dowd about emoluments, but he's leveraging the White House in really just despicable ways. The conflicts, right? You could just say, well, he's getting rich, but what he's doing is he's selling out the American people. He's pursuing policies that benefit him regardless of whether they help us. And that should be a disqualifier. But the problem is, as you just said, people, and as I've been saying, people look at the Democrats and say, well, what are they doing for me? They're not doing anything for me either.
Well, I think a good summation of all of this is the last couple sentences in Marie Dowd's column. She's a great writer, and she usually is on top of things. And just let me read this from her. Before he did his YMCA dance and scrammed early, the scamming Trump told the crypto enthusiasts at his golf club that he wasn't pushing crypto and Bitcoin for himself. I really do it, he says, because I think it's the right thing to do. In Trump's moral universe, says Dowd, the right thing to do is always the thing that makes him richer. And that sums it up very well.
Yeah. And again, that's the kind of activity that should disqualify him. But because so many Americans, as you said, because there's so much inequality and because Democrats haven't provided real improvements in people's lives either, a hustler, a scammer, a huckster like Trump can win. And does win.
I don't think people really know all that's going on and all the things he's doing, because there's a large contingent of Americans that listen and watch Fox News and all of the other ones that are like Fox News and in online also, and people don't get a good idea of what really is going on. Not like in the old days, we had the Walter Cronkites and the Huntley and Brinkley. People understood what was going on generally, but now we're so far apart, and one side is so extreme and the other side is extreme. So I think people are lost. And
Yeah, inequality is a terrible pathology. It causes inequality and poverty together, causes so much mistrust, so much distrust, and we're seeing that now. And so much, it's not just interclass, but intra-class fighting. So working class people, maybe different genders, different races, different nations of origin at each other's throats.
And not only that, Hal, I mean, there are answers to these things, but Trump is killing those answers. If you go to Europe, and they have free higher education, they have free health care. We don't have those things in this country, and they're only going to get worse because Trump is cutting the VA, he's cutting Social Security, he's cutting all the things that are a little bit answers for the American people who are struggling, and he's just making it worse.
No argument. So here's from Kristof. This is why I really liked his piece, despite he spends most of his column really attacking Trump. And again, I'm going to ask that question, get back to the theme. Is this a Trump first a strategy that Kristof and Hartmann are pursuing, where they're telling us how bad Trump is? They want to defeat Trump, but then after taking Trump down, much as after the allies, Russia, US, and Great Britain took down Hitler, they turned to Japan and in short order defeated the Empire of the Sun as well. So my question would be, do you think these columnists also recognize Democratic elites, not necessarily all Democrats, certainly not maybe Democratic voters, but people like those on my thumbnail, Schumer, Jeffries, Pelosi, she's not on it, Obama, as part of the problem, and that they're going to turn on them at some point?
Yeah, you're right. I think both of us probably liked the end of Kristof's column when he says, the last task for Democrats is to fix our own.
I got it on the screen too, Arlen. You can look at your screen. I got that exact paragraph up. I know we had talked about it. Right. It really hurts the brand if in states where you have the trifecta, in other words, you have the governor, you have both houses of the legislature, and certainly in California, the courts. I don't know about Oregon or Washington State, but if you have all that power and you can't fix your own state, people walk down the street in Berkeley or along the beach in Monterey, and you see homeless encampments everywhere. You're going to be like, wait, they're not doing a good job either.
I'm hoping that maybe that's going to change, because you see Newsom starting to get a little more conservative, a little bit talking more about the things that he's criticized for, and there's plenty to criticize him in California. And maybe, and in Oakland, maybe they're realizing you just can't have this happen, where the homeless are taking over, criminals are taking over. That's gonna, the Republicans will emphasize that, and the Democrats will never have a chance to win. So it could be that the Democrats are starting to see that, and maybe we'll make enough changes, anti-crime, anti-corruption, that maybe that'll help their cause.
Yeah, well, again, we're going to part ways a little bit, because I think the way to address the homeless crisis is to provide them with the support that they need. I mean, we're living in an economy, people are many people are just barely surviving. They're on the cusp of homelessness. I think I was talking to somebody who I know who may be homeless, and I didn't know that, but I found out about it. I'm going to have to look into that. I get what you're saying, Newsom and other California Democrats. Here you see them clearing this encampment in Oakland. We'll play the clip, but you're basically just sweeping the problem under the carpet, as far as I can tell. You're not actually providing homes, providing the housing that they need. And I would like to see Democrats do that.
Yeah, absolutely, Hal. I agree with you totally. The problem is, how is it going to happen? I mean, certainly the Republicans are not going to provide those kind of benefits. The Democrats probably can't afford to, do all the things that
They
we
could
like.
raise taxes on Silicon Valley. They could raise taxes on Hollywood. And I heard of the story, Arlen. Sorry to interrupt you because I know you're talking. I feel bad, but I will give you a plenty chance to respond. And you may have heard of this story. The director in Los Angeles of the homeless programs was recently indicted because she had been skimming, I think, millions of dollars that were supposed to go to, street people, and were instead going to her and her favored few.
Well, this stuff goes on all the time, historically and recently, and it will continue to go on. I mean, there will be corruption, and for the Democrats to find some money somewhere to get the homeless people the benefits they need, whether it be employment or jobs. I mean, well, employment is jobs, or
housing.
Housing. All that is going to be really hard to find the money for.
It's very tough in California because it's so expensive to live there too. I mean, you're looking in Silicon Valley, $1.5 to $2 million for a 3-bedroom. I mean, and not on a big plot, just a little postage stamp lot, 3-bedroom. You got to put down close to $2 million, or that's what the ultimate cost is going to be. Let me play this clip real quick, and there is some criticism of the governor in it.
Reaction tonight to the closure of a massive homeless encampment in Oakland, an operation the city is calling, quote, a huge success. While neighbors are glad to see the East 12th Street camp finally cleared out, some homeless advocates are upset.
So let me stop it just real quick there, because what you heard was what you were saying. Sure, the people who live in that area, they're paying a heavy price to have homeless folks in their neighborhood. And it's totally, I'm not going to condemn them or say, oh, they shouldn't want to have a big encampment right under the freeway. Of course they don't want it there. But again, is the answer just rousting these people up and moving them to some other community? I don't know.
That's the problem. There's nowhere to go. I think a lot of homeless are attracted to California because the weather is decent, but they're not making any success. They're just struggling. They're living on the streets, and the answers, things that would help them are not going to happen or haven't been happening. And we have to figure out a way to make them happen and get the American people behind it.
I froze that anchor with her mouth wide open. You can see her lower jaw, her lower teeth. Let's play more.
How it was handled. KTVU's John Krinjak has more.
I was driving by and I was shocked to see the whole encampment was clean.
These aerial shots showing two strikingly different scenes along East 12th Street in Oakland. A massive homeless encampment near 14th Avenue and Interstate 880.
I said under the freeway, but it's really next to the freeway, and it was on a public thoroughfare. Arlen?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of those going up, unfortunately, because there's so many people who don't have the money to afford housing. And, that's just going to continue, unfortunately.
In Utah, they give homeless people money, and they have these micro apartments that they can afford given the stipend that they receive. The problem, why that's maybe not replicable in California, is because housing is so much more expensive. You can get a apartment in Salt Lake City maybe for $1,000 or less a month. I don't think that's anywhere close to possible in any of the large population centers, at least on the coast in California.
Yeah, the people that live around here, young people, have to move to other states because they can't possibly afford to own a home here in California. And, and nothing seems like it's going to change in that respect. So, I think it would be great if people would vote for Bernie, and Bernie probably would have some ideas, but of course, they would get batted down, I'm sure, by others.
Well, he's too old now, too, I think. He's old.
No, I don't expect him to run for president. I think he would be great, but yeah, he is too old.
Why is it so expensive there? I really not. Do you have any immediate answer to that? Is it just because it is? I love living in California. I mean, for all the problems, it's beautiful. The climate is tremendous. I miss it. I like where I live now. Not like I want to move back necessarily, but there were many aspects of California living that I really, really liked. Is that the reason it's so expensive?
For one thing, I think there's a lot of lot of money in, people who are into, Silicon Valley, the Apples, the Googles and all that. So that they're buying, maybe 2 or 3 houses and bumping up the price so that the average person can't afford it. I think that's one factor.
All right, you're watching Politics. We've got Arlen. He blogs at thebigpicturereport.com. He is the thought leader as well. And I took that out. I took it out of his little lower third there. We call it a lower third, even though it's not on the lower part of the screen, but right below him where it says Arlen Grossman. I took out the bit because we just wanted to make it give us a little more room for our images. Maybe you would have preferred the green and white. I don't know, but let's don't forget. By the way, go to Politics. We're seeing a lot of folks posting on Facebook and Politics, which I always really, really appreciate. Let me go ahead and give you the little flyer, whatever we call that thing that I put together there. Oh, there we go. And get rid of my oval. And all sorts of issues, Arlen, but actually today has been surprisingly tech good day, I will say. Let's play a little more from this. I want to hear what the homeless advocates are upset with the governor about.
He shut down.
We have customers that drive by now and they was amazed. Hey, we can see the freeway again.
The huge operation began May 12th with crews removing more than 400 tons of debris, including 33 abandoned cars.
It was an eyesore.
Yeah.
And it was very hard for them to tackle it.
Notably, a fire erupted just one day after the work began. A blaze city officials say was able to be contained because of the fire breaks they'd put in. Then this week, Oakland PD found a body here.
We let this thing get way out of hand.
Well, I think it's great that it's been cleared up.
The city says so far 70 people who lived in the 12th Street encampment have moved in here to this converted hotel called Mandela House. A total of 106 people are now living here, including some from a camp in Mosswood Park that was closed last month, and another on MLK Way that was cleared last September.
When the individuals go into Mandela House, they will be offered wraparound services, an opportunity to get counseling. There'll also be services to provide them with the next step or the pathway to long-term housing.
The city did not keep its word.
Some homeless advocates say the city moved too fast in clearing the East 12th encampment.
People lost medication, people lost their clothing, their food.
And they say many are still living on the street.
I've been able to reconnect with 54 people who lived in that encampment who were not offered anything.
The city says that number is much lower, possibly a couple dozen, adding some declined alternative shelter options. But they do acknowledge
we do not have enough space because there are over 1,400 encampments in the city of Oakland.
The city will now begin removing smaller debris from the 12th Street site, including needles left behind.
Yeah, so it is a terrible problem. You have to do something about it, Arlen, but you know, it seems like a success mostly with some disappointments, except you heard what that woman, what the host said. There's 14, did he say 1,400 sites in Oakland? That's extraordinary.
Well, there's no easy way to do this. There's no comfortable way to do it. You can't just take all the homeless people and put them into nice hotels. It's just not going to happen and give them all the services that they really need. So, it's a problem that's going to continue probably for a long time. But I'll tell you one thing, Hal. As you know, I've been around a long time, and I never saw homeless people until Reagan was elected. And after that, I started to see that. I started to see people on the corners, and it just keeps getting worse and worse.
Well, he opened up the mental institutions. There were mentally ill folks who were living in hospitals, and then they were released. And so that added to the problem. But I think a bigger factor now is just the economics. As they're working poor, they can't afford homes. And then there are unemployed people who obviously can't afford homes.
And people don't seem to care anymore like they used to. I think people really, cared more about people who were in those kind of situations, at least, in the 1970s, 1980s, and prior to that. But, that kind of, that's not happening now. Now everybody seems to be only for themselves. How can they make the most profit? How can they make the most money? and they don't have much sympathy for those people who are homeless or in bad shape like those people are.
Well, I think people are afraid they might become homeless themselves, and they have little sympathy for others, often in the same or worse situation. It's very, very, very sad. And what Kristof ends with is, he says, we have to fix our communities. We have to have better schools. We have to help take care of the homeless people. And he also, makes the point we have to hold ourselves accountable. And I wasn't clear. What does he mean by that, do you think? Because I'm not asking that rhetorically. I'm not quite clear. This is the last paragraph of Kristof's piece. However appalling Trump's behavior may be, his critics have to show that they can not only mock him, but also govern. And I 100% agree with that. Sure. If we're to hold Trump accountable, we must also hold ourselves accountable.
I'm just thinking about all the people who are homeless and have those kind of problems, that the way to fix that is to give them the services they need. And the way to give them those services is to raise taxes, to get some money in there to do these things. But right now we're in a country that doesn't like taxes, that revolts against taxes, and that's why it's not going to happen. We have to get to the point where, we want to help everybody, but right now everybody's selfish and only thinking of themselves and only making money. And, Trump is, of course, the biggest example of that. I mean, he's making good money off being the president, but he's not really helping people.
Well, that's fair, but I would counter a little bit with what I've heard others say as well. This isn't from me. That have the voters really had an opportunity? Have we really had an opportunity to vote for candidates who champion truly progressive policies?
No, we haven't. You're right.
I mean, the argument that I heard, and I like your response, is the Democrats haven't really had a primary that they got to decide, that the voters decided since 2008. 2012, it was Obama. I mean, presumably the voters would have picked Obama, but he was the incumbent. He had a clear path. There was not even, I don't believe there was even a primary challenge to Obama in 2012. Bernie talked about it, didn't have one. 2016, the way was pretty much cleared, if you recall, for Hillary, with only Bernie challenging her, and certainly the elite stepped in to direct the race towards her to the extent possible. Same with 2020. Now, I think we could have voted for Bernie. We didn't. So I'm not going to totally blame it all on Barack Obama or whoever, but still, it's clear there was rigging going on. And 24, there was no primary really either. So Democrats need to be more democratic, I guess.
Yeah, and if ever there was a time to change, for the Democratic Party to change and get further away from the rich and powerful, this is the time. I mean, they were shellacked in the election. I mean, not that it was a real wide shellacking, but they were certainly lost all the major, Congress and everything else. And unless they find a way to, make some important changes, nothing's going to happen. And you could tell that one of the problems is they keep the same leaders. You have Schumer, you have Hakeem Jeffries. I mean, if you're really going to change the party, you have to change the leadership, and they're not willing to do that. Not yet.
I honestly think this is my biggest criticism of the so-called left in the House of Representatives, is they simply continue to vote for these centrist corporatists. And we saw that with Nancy Pelosi, who, when she first came into the House, I believe in the early 90s, was pretty far to the left. But she stayed long past her sell date, in my view, and she was, roundly popular in the caucus because she got money. She raised money for other voters, for other Democrats. As you point out, money is a big problem. There wasn't even a challenge from the left to Hakeem Jeffries when he was anointed Pelosi's successor in 22. And that I find extraordinarily frustrating.
Yeah, it is frustrating, and they really do have to make major changes. But, if you're a politician, if you're a representative or a senator, you have a great position. You have all kinds of perks. You could buy stock from inside information. You can, you have so much, and nobody wants to give that up. So if they were to, not rely on their donors, then they might lose their seat. So I think that's a big problem right there, that they don't want to make enough change, enough of a difference to change things because they're so well off as they are.
Well, yeah, the system's working great for them, just not for everyone else. All right, I just wanted to show this. So this is from LAist. This is a story from May 6, 2026. I'm just going to share this. I don't know. I guess you're not familiar with the story, Arlen, about the corruption in the homeless office there. Well, see, this is the thing. When FDR became president, he insisted on squeaky clean government. He was going to come down so hard on any corruption because, he was calling for a bigger, more powerful, more muscular federal government to take on the Great Depression. And he said, hey, if you guys siphon money off, I'm going to just throw the book at you because you'll ruin a good thing for everybody. What you're seeing in LA now, LA's top homeless official hired unqualified friends and tried to destroy public records. And there's also a real question again about how much money may have gone into her own pocket. And we don't know. Maybe it being a little bit unfair, but it seems like she was steering government contracts to her buds and doing that kind of stuff.
Well, we need people like FDR and others, Teddy Roosevelt and all that, who had some integrity. And look at Obama, Barack Obama. His administration for 2 terms was relatively scandal-free. But, but they still attacked him from every angle, Republicans. And so, we'll never have that again, the way things are looking right now.
All right, Arlen, we're pretty much done. We've gone through the whole hour, and I want to just be real clear. I'm looking at these challenges to the former head of the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. And I don't see any specific allegations that Valisha Adams Kellum was steering money to herself. It's more about helping her friends out. And so we don't have that. And I don't want to leave anybody feeling or thinking, that there's a claim that she simply stole or embezzled funds. That is not what I'm seeing here. But I will do more work to try to figure out what's going on in that office. Arlen, anything else before we call it a day?
Well, we're going to see more things like in Los Angeles and everywhere else, because we don't have what we used to have, things like morality and honesty and integrity. Those things seem out of focus right now, and nobody's really, wanting to change that or making the kind of argument that would make other people want to do that. But, we have to look back at what Obama did and what decent people did and try to, get closer to that than we are right now.
All right, Arlen, you have a great afternoon. It is afternoon after all in California now. And you're looking at your watch, 12:04.
Yeah,
this is according to your watch maybe a couple of seconds slow. I mean, my computer's checking with a satellite every, 10th of a second or some crazy fraction of a second. That'll do it, like I said, for today's Politics. And I'll be back tomorrow. We'll have Arlen next Tuesday.
You got it.